good afternoon everyone, I hope you enjoyed your lunch and I hope you enjoyed the morning and really what you've been looking at is the kind of rich tapestry of COIL. What I don't want you to be afraid of is that I've come down the hill from the Gilbert Scott, from Academic Policy and Governance, I'm here to read the Riot Act. I'm absolutely not, okay? So my key purpose here is to make sure that there is consistency and to make sure, most importantly, that once a student has engaged in COIL, that it is on their transcript. And we have got a way in which we can say to a student, this is what you've participated in, and it sits in your transcript. And also, in the background, I get KPIs. I get to see how mobility is impacted and what opportunities in mobility that COIL has given us. What's happened to the type of partnerships that we can engage in? Has this been a springboard for more rich partnership and alignment across our institutional partners? And what does this mean for our internationalisation targets? So I don't want to scare you with rules and regulations, this is not what they are, and it is guidance that's published on the website. And I want to make sure that we've got a lot of time for questions and everything as well. So that's my little disclaimer, don't be afraid. So my name's Ashley, I work for Academic Policy and Governance, and I specifically work on the learning and teaching strategy. So I know this off by heart. This is my bread and butter. And what I'm specifically working on is the kind of transforming curricula and assessment work stream, we call it, or pillar. Everybody loves a pillar in their strategy, especially at Glasgow. What I wanted to do is just to point out to you where within this strategy COIL really appears. We're looking at collaboration, we're looking at enabling students who otherwise would not be able to participate in mobility, the opportunity to meet someone who doesn't look, doesn't sound, doesn't live in the same place that they do, but might in some way have some form of educational track that allows them to be in the same place for a couple of sessions, maybe 5, let's see. Mobility is key. We spend a lot of time within the internationalisation space. We dramatise it, we make it very, very intellectual, but what it means for students really is that less than 3% of the entire student population in the world are actively mobile. That means they can pack a suitcase, take their passport, get on a plane and enjoy sometimes warmer climes, sunnier climes than we have just now. I went to Athens and it absolutely changed my whole trajectory, but that probably isn't possible for my daughter in the absence of Erasmus. So what I'm trying to do here is give students an option that might inspire them to start to take risks, for example, and get on a plane after perhaps participating in something like COIL. And this is what the whole strategy is trying to do. It's trying to be provocative, it's trying to be transformational, and it's trying to use all the different tools that we have in front of us to make sure that students move in a way in which it can open up the world. Next. Thank you. So COIL, I will not go through this. I think you're all probably versed in this. It's probably tatted into your eyeballs. But this is our kind of institutional definition, which probably is not any different to what Gabrielle has been telling you or what Lexi's been introducing as well. But when people hear it, they shudder a wee bit because they're like, that sounds quite gimmicky. But this is what we're working with. And the key thing is that kind of collaborative piece as well. So what I want to take you through today is the kind of process in which, and the kind of key stop and think points along the process as well. I must emphasise, I am not an expert in your discipline. So I don't know what works. I don't know what doesn't work. I don't know what's appropriate, okay? I can tell you within my discipline of external relations, it used to be, international relations, where COIL would be most appropriate, perhaps when it comes to looking at policy agendas, foreign policy, local policy. But for your own educational policies and approaches, there might be things that just scream out COIL, okay? There might be things that you think, this is absolutely fertile ground for this type of collaboration. However, there's a lot of paperwork and I don't have time. Or I don't understand really how appropriately I should use this, or how does this align with what the centre is telling us to do. So please take these as guidelines. This is us being able to capture what is happening, share best practice, and again, be able to augment the student experience positively. So think about this, you have that first discussion, you go away on an international trip, you're exhausted, and everybody you meet seems really, really exciting, and you think, right, okay, how can we make this work? We want to encourage you to have those all those different types of conversation. And it might be that you want to kind of put your toe in the water. There might be a joint degree, for example, that you're planning. But why not try something around COIL at first to kind of test the partnership and understand what opportunities might be there as well. So in that first discussion, what I would recommend and what the guidance would say is that we can start to trial these conversations. Where would it fit? What timeline are you on? Are you in Japan or Australia, where actually the year is flipped? Summer is a completely different time, and our academic years are usually quite limited in the window that we can share and engage across a classroom. So these are the types of things that when you're having these conversations, think about where that person is, how does the calendar align, and then how can we make this work across the subject area as well. What I would ask you to do is to think about internally, locally, what your strategy is. Is it that you are being asked to COIL a particular course that already exists, or is it a new course that you're thinking, actually, I want to be really quite transformative in my pedagogy here and start to add these bits in? So we can COIL a course that already exists, or you can create a course. And I'm sure Gabriella has been able to talk you through how that would work as well. So think about what your school priorities are, and also what technology you have in front of you as well. When you're specifically looking at partners, there are lots of different things that you can use, particularly from external relations. The partner assessment tool is a really handy thing to use. So you might already, locally in the school, have a list of priority partners. You might have experience with specific partners, but you might have a new conversation that has developed and evolved. And using the partner assessment tool, it's almost a kind of like market assessment about the ranking of that particular partner, how their strategy internationally and pedagogically aligns, and it just helps you kind of mitigate any risk, I would say, along the way. Then you're starting to look at this kind of test phase, and what I would say is that this is quite a busy piece of work, but you can have your course running as is along the way. So if you have course A, for example, running in semester 1 of 24-25, what we would say is that you could have COIL embedded in that course already. You don't have to re-PIP. Everyone shudders when I say that. You don't have to re-PIP yet. You don't have to sign any agreement. But what I would say is having the due diligence, yes, this is a good fit for our school. And then you can start to run this, because it might be that you realise that a Wednesday morning is great for your students, absolutely awful for the other students. It might be that you anticipated there would be a bank holiday Monday today. A lot of people did this, but alas, only some people get this bank holiday Monday, okay? So what we want you to do is be able to kind of iron out all the wrinkles and allow yourselves to look at what that engagement might look like before you commit to it, per se. So while your course is running, then we'd expect you to start to look at the different aspects of COIL and the agreements that we would like to have in place. So what I'll do is I'll talk you through those, and then we'll go back to this at the end, and you'll see it's not quite as complicated as it may seem. Thank you. So there are lots of benefits of COIL, and you'll hear this, you'll see this in the case studies. These are probably quite sanitised in terms of what I'm presenting, because what we haven't got is a student standing right in front of you and saying, this has encouraged me to do X, Y, and Z, and it's really given me the confidence, again, to get on a plane, or maybe apply for a job that's not local, or engage in a conversation with a student up the road in the campus that I know is an international student, but I wouldn't have been able to do that before. These key, subtle interactions really help when students are graduating and they're going into the job market, so we can't really take them for granted. It also allows staff to start to test different pedagogies. There might be just a different way of thinking, approaching, and doing in terms of your discipline. Are you curious about that? Do you want to start to explore that? So there are so many different benefits that you can see quite quickly from that COIL experience as well. So this is where the rules start to come in, okay? Or guidelines, let's keep to them as guidelines. So for COIL to be registered as such, what we're looking for is 5 interactions, okay? Now as a course convener, it's up to yourself to decide what that interaction is, okay? And this is where these are guidelines about monitoring and registering COIL, but you are the expert in the room about what is most appropriate for your course. So we do not have a list of criteria. What we want is that there is an online environment that is created and is open to both cohorts, and that that's available for them to be able to use. And what we call that is a COIL window. So you'll see here in my lovely diagrams, can you see I'm not very good with this, is that as soon as you hit number 1, first interaction, that opens your COIL window. Okay. So I've only put 5 there. This is the bare minimum for this to be registered as COIL, these 3 different variations. But because we've started in week 1, or we've started just maybe slightly further into the semester, each box representing a week, then it means that the COIL window is open. And the COIL window remains open, regardless of the interaction, right until the end of the course. And the reason that we do that is because if you're looking to augment your assessment, the students need to have access to these different opportunities, to the group, perhaps to the shared resources as well. Okay? So it doesn't have to happen right away. It might be genuinely that the course just doesn't align, so you have to kind of load it into the back of the course, or you might have to flip it. But that would mean, as you see in the first kind of box, that you start to kind of reduce down the interactions, and that might be because there's a national holiday in Hong Kong, or perhaps summer holidays or Christmas holidays elsewhere. Okay? So that is the main criteria for then it to kickstart that it be registered as a COIL. The reason that we do this is because, as I've said, we recognise COIL on the student's transcript under here. We pull this mobility KPI, so on my campus it gets switched on, so we know that the student has engaged in some form of mobility. And for partnerships, once the letter of agreement is signed, that will go to external relations and logged. And that allows them to see what type of engagement is happening with that partner as well. I will collate all of this data, and it will be able to help me evidence what impact the learning and teaching strategy is having as well. You don't need to worry about that. That's my problem. So one of the key things that we discuss around COIL is assessment. Oh my goodness. Someone is going to be assessing my students. No, not at all. We're not doing that. Okay? So the course is owned by you, by Glasgow. It's put through the PIP system. And respectively, whatever your partner is, or whoever they are, they will do the same locally. This means you're not having to translate grades, you're not having to try and do something with assessment, you're not having to try and use a different portal to assess. It means you're not having to wait on an exam board elsewhere, which may be at the end of the year, at the end of the semester, may have been last week. Okay? So everything that you know in terms of the course running, in terms of assessment, will remain the same. That said, what we would like you to do within the assessment is be reflective of that experience. Okay? So you'll have learned, or you've heard about the LTA, the Learning Through Assessment document, and I've linked it here and also on the last slide. And when you look for the Learning Through Assessment document, you'll see that COIL fits quite nicely into this meaningful assessment criteria, which means when you're looking to augment your assessment, you're looking at that specific part of the criteria as well. All coursework, as we know, should now be accessible and inclusive, and should be in line with the ALIP as well. So I've also linked that at the end, just as a reminder. And what we would ask is that your ILOs are adjusted, okay? And I use adjusted very, very deliberately. There could be a situation that the COIL interaction does not happen, okay? We've all experienced COVID, where the whole world stopped, shut down, went home and took the laptops with them. But what we want to do is to make sure that the students, the local students, are not impacted by that interaction not happening, okay? So when you're looking at the ILOs and when you're looking at the assessment, I want you to ask yourself, what if this doesn't happen, okay? Can something still be simulated or put together in order to make sure that the learning outcomes are achieved, and in order to facilitate the students having a positive experience of assessment as well. And that's where the case studies are really key. Okay, that's where it's really key to have a network and like this, and to be able to speak to Denver, for example, University of Florida. There are lots of different examples available where this has been changed just enough to capture COIL, but also just enough to make sure that the course can continue as well. Next slide. So when you're looking at the agreement and this conversation that you would have with a prospective partner, you're looking really to capture dates. So you'll see on the website we have a kind of, what we've tried to do is a big global calendar of when people are off, when the summer is, etc., etc. But until you speak to a specific school in your partner's university, then you might not know. Okay, there could be a reading week, for example, or it could be a creativity week for engineering, for example, and it doesn't quite fit as well. Remember, you're not necessarily always going to be partner to partner in terms of school to school. So education might be partnering with arts and humanities. You may be looking at a creative course. You may actually be looking at a STEM course as well. So just be quite mindful when you're looking at dates. Timelines as well. Great British Summertime versus Greenwich Mean Time can absolutely throw everything out of whack completely just by 1 hour. So you log on and someone hurriedly answers a phone and they're sitting eating their dinner or their kids are running about crazy or they're driving, okay? So please be mindful of that just variation in that 1 hour, because it can really alter what happens in a day as well. You don't want someone brushing their teeth while they're trying to listen to your presentations. So you really have a lot of power as a course convener, being able to choose who you interact with, in what way, in what subject area. There's a lot of creativity there as well. What we'd like to do is for you to just kind of establish what that working practice might be. And this is where this course, when you've not repicked it, you've not changed the ILOs, you've not changed the assessment, you can start to be testing all of these different things out. And also make a really informed decision of, it might be that you like COIL as a tool, but that partnership isn't going to quite work, okay? So it might be that you start to talk among yourselves to say, well, actually I had a really positive experience with CUSU, for example, and there are other opportunities to open that up as well. So this is where the letter of expression of interest comes in, and we have linked that. This is somewhere between an MOU and an MOA. Okay, an MOU doesn't really do too much, and quite often it lacks the detail about what actually the activity is. The letter of expression of interest is about COIL. Okay, so that's why we ask you to complete that instead of an MOU. An MOA is something which is much more high level, is much more encompassing. You tend to see that where there is a joint award. So that's why we use this letter of expression of interest. We also allow us then to kind of track this because it would be sent to external relations. And then there's also a data sharing agreement for each course as well. And there is information on the website about this. Now, please don't be overwhelmed, okay? This just keeps everybody right, and it makes sure that there is, if you do have any questions, not only do you have these agreements in place, but also it means that you know what team to be able to talk to for any advice. The data sharing agreement is usually very, very standard. The letter of expression of interest is usually very standard, but it might be at that point, that's where things will surface with the partner, and it might be they ask for a particular thing to be changed, and that's where you can start to talk that round. So these things can be quite good as points of discussion, just for you to stop and address and see if the partnership is going the way in which you wish it to. Okay. What we would ask also is that there's a review on an annual basis. So from the very beginning, we want you to talk about when this review may happen and when it would be kind of fortuitous for it to happen as well. Think about what you were trying to achieve. Speak to the students who are involved, speak to staff, and speak to your respective partner. There may be things that could be quite easily tweaked, or there might be things that have to have quite a big change in that review process as well. We want to understand what's really valuable, and it might be that we come back to you for a case study to be able to see how it's functioned. And what we'd probably expect is that there would be at least 2 years of engagement. So the annual review in the first year might throw up some maybe significant changes or something which is much more subtle. But we would encourage you to continue with that partnership, unless it's, it's not possible. But we'd like you to try and continue with that partnership, because sometimes second time's a charm, and it really helps us to augment and understand what's happening in that learning environment as well. If that has to continue, then you renew the letter of interest, and that gets resubmitted into external relations. So, I've talked you through what this looks like, okay? When it comes to the Board of Studies, for example, the PIP form has been changed. Now, this was no mean feat. It took me a year to change one question on the PIP form, and it's merely a yes or no. It's not really that complicated, but I'm very, very grateful. I know this is on camera. Very grateful that the PIP form has been changed. So now, when you go into PIP, there will be a choice. It will always automatically default to no. So you just have to tick the box to say that yes, indeed, this course contains COIL. What it will not do is ask you with what partner, and the activities will be listed just as it would be within a PIP form. So it doesn't change what the PIP form looks like, but it just registers that COIL is indeed part of the course, or the course has been COILed. So as you can see, you might have a course that's changed very, very lightly to incorporate these 5 interactions so that we can call it Course A COILed into the next academic session. Okay? So if you have Course A already on the books, it might stay on the books. So if you decide in 2 years' time that actually the COIL interaction hasn't worked for whatever reason, then that course, the original course, can resurface, and that's a discussion that you have with your local Board of Studies as well. Okay? But now we have Course A, which is COILed, and we would hope that you build on that, and that becomes the kind of standard course that is in your course catalogue locally as well. There is a nice checklist at the end, and that's on the next slide. And this is just to keep everybody right. So the Board of Studies has a particular checklist. It's slightly smaller than this, and it's just basically when they're approaching a PIP form that notes that it has COIL in it, they're looking for key things, okay, just to make sure that everybody's on the right page. But there is also a checklist for conveners, so that you can go through this and just kind of keep yourself right. It's absolutely fine to contact myself or anyone locally who has experience in COIL, and we're happy to go through and make sure that your course looks and feels and that you're confident in that interaction as well. I think it's a very, very positive thing to be introducing students into the COIL environment. It opens up a huge opportunity for them, and it also allows you to test partnerships. If anyone doesn't have much experience in partnerships, this is a really good way to start to test that environment as well. So I'm going to open the floor to questions. If I don't know the answer, I will email you back with the answer as a group over the next week. But please let me know if you have any questions at all. And there's lots of links on the next slide. Okay. Abby, yes.
So just in terms of if we're going through that sort of PIP process, and if your assessment is being changed as part of a COIL activity, or you're changing your intended learning outcomes, you will still require the standard consultations to take place. External academic and student consultations will be mandatory for those types of changes.
Yes, so it is a major change.
Yeah.
Okay, so everything, if you are COILing a course, it will be a major change. Lexi, sorry, you probably have the same discussion where we're talking. PIP is just our course approval programme. So it would be a major change, and it would go to the Board of Studies. Yeah.
Okay. Just for clarification, so it's the development team are responsible for course and programme approvals and also internationalisation partnership tracking as well, so that will come through my team. So anything you do in that area, I'll to involve Jennifer and Stephanie and myself.
And Abby, what do you think the time scale would be then?
So if you were looking for course approvals for, if you wanted to put it within your course documentation, so you're testing this year, we would be looking at taking intimations for course changes in February. And at that point, and then, yeah, we should get it finalised through by March. We like to get all those final things done by March because of the potential impact on timetabling and submission timetabling changes.
And even for piloting.
So pilot, you're not requiring anything. So,
No. So pilot, yeah, you're not requiring it, but originally what we wanted to do is just start right away. And I thought, no, that wouldn't be the best idea, it would be the kindest thing to do, but also we want you to be able to essentially get your house in order and test it out at the same time before that kind of commitment to the COIL is made much more concrete as well. It also allows you to discuss with students to see if that's something that they would be comfortable with, because it might not be for every student, or it might be that they actually don't know what it is, or they've got absolutely no opinion on it, but then they have a really positive experience as well. So that's why it's key to go on the transcript, because we do a lot of things to students and they find it very, very difficult to articulate it. So by making sure that it's on the transcript and it's declared, hopefully then it allows them to be able to speak to it.
If I can add something here. By experience, I have to say that if you already have a relationship with a partner and you already had some conversations with them, you might want to go straight away on looking into the PIPs and looking how to change them, because you feel very comfortable with this partner. You already know that your course will do well with it, so you might want to think around that way. But if it is a new partnership or you haven't had any of these type of conversations with them, piloting is really safe space where you can do it. But you do it with the idea that those changes are coming. So you already, when you have those conversations that to do the pilot for the COIL, you also add those conversations around so how do we integrate this in a course, how we make this long term, how we do, so you do those conversations around what changes you need to make in the PIPs, also with your, including your partner in that. But one question I have about the piloting stage.
Can we go back to that slide? Just so we're...
Is it this one?
Yeah.
So in the piloting stage, we still go for those 5 sessions because we want to make it meaningful for our students. How do we record the piloting stage for those 5 sessions if the PIPs is not being changed? Because obviously those students of that year, they had the experience, so they could have a peer recognition. So how do we do it?
So that won't be recorded?
Won't be recorded.
Okay, so the process is that there would be a trial. Now you might want to be very open with the students to say we're piloting this is a new thing that we're doing, and talk to the students how they will articulate that. Okay, remind them about the skills that they're picking up. We do not have a formal way of recognising that, and that's why it is then important to be in the long run preparing for this to be integrated, embedded part of the course.
So am I right to say that then a pilot could also be a bit shorter than 5 if that's enough?
I think that's at the discretion of the convener. It's about the confidence of, declaring it and pipping it as COIL. But what would have to happen is that those 5 sessions, at least 5 sessions, have to be surfaced for it to be badged.
Okay. Any other question? Fire them now.
Yes.
Can I ask a quick one? Sorry, just come back to the PIPs give me the
We are. No, don't worry.
Yeah.
We're working on it at the back. This is a tiny wee bit of all the other stuff that's going on.
So, like, if I was going to do a COIL and look for the PIP change, it says yes or no, right?
Yes.
Okay, so I say yes. And say for talking say something happens in that, the communication breaks down, what doesn't happen, and that's been published on, the Cathco's catalogue. Then the students will say, well, that was supposed to be a court, how's it, does that leave us kind of open for, and my question was that yes or no box would it, I'm going to say would it be better, that's not the right question, but is that, could that potentially have said, does this or can this course be coiled?
Yes.
And yes, so it's like, yes, it can be coiled, unless it's going to be, but it can be, rather than yes it is or no it's not. Could this course be coiled? I'm just wondering if that would be a better way of phrasing it, so that it leaves you flexibility to say, well, it didn't run, rather than, well, I'm committed to that, I need to try and
Mhm.
do something, if that makes any sense.
Yes, we had a lot of discussion about can, would, will, yes, no. It was a long and lengthy discussion, and we rested on by committee, large committees, about this yes, no.
Okay.
What I would say is that, again, having a really open discussion with the students to say, this is why this can happen, or having a statement that because of the partnership it's not quite worked out and it would have been detrimental to your learning experience if that had kind of failed halfway through or something like that. So I think again these are guidelines in which to be able to approach it, and if COIL takes place it's allowing us to capture it. But PIP, the issue with PIP and what most of us know is that PIP is there to kind of retain information. It's not agile, okay, so it can't really be updated, and you don't really expect it to have those speculative questions. It's quite black and white, and that's the system that we have at the moment. However, going forward, if there are changes, I'll be smiling at me, if there are changes, then we might be able to have that where it's much more fluid, the way it's surfaced.
It was just something that was because in our elective courses, for example, there's maybe 8 different electives, and students choose an elective, and it might be one of those electives is doing COIL, and the other 7 aren't.
Yes.
How does that with the PIP? That causes, does that make sense?
Yeah, no, it does, but it also happens with mobility. So for mobility for lots of different reasons, that mobility window may close, or it may just not happen, might not be open. So again, this is where the pilot phase is really key. Okay, from an institutional reputation point of view, our partners tend not to sign an agreement, an expression of interest agreement, or these letters without the intention of making it run. So see it very much as a dialogue, and I would hope if there were any issues or something was flagged, that would be tracked quite early on, and an alternative or something would be able to come up with. You don't see that happening often, however, it's just something to, when you're having these conversations, it's constant check back. Are we ready for that session? Do we have things in place? And until you're confident that that's in place, then you don't put the course through. Okay.
Can I also have just a clarification, because when we attended an assessment and feedback session that was run by the college, and one of the things that was mentioned is that for minor changes to a PIP, there are extra dates, such as September to be an extra date. Could the COIL be considered within that range, or are only the normal timelines, two times a year, and that's it? So how does it work?
For the School of Education, we will not be accepting any course changes for 24-25 at this point. So any course changes will need to be 25-24 with 25-26. Just because that's the school process. I know that was mentioned that everybody can do lots of changes before it's September. No, the school's not allowing that.
Okay.
Yeah, so that really is down to the equivalent of Abbey in every school and the equivalent of Duncan in every So it really depends on what the school has capacity for, and it comes down to capacity for yourself as a convener and also for the school. But also think about it, it comes down to the capacity of being able to have these types of conversations with students when they're in front of you. I'm designing a new course. Would you like the idea of? And they might just look at you blankly as if, don't really like, it doesn't matter what we hear, or they might say that sounds really interesting, or why that partner and not that partner, why that country and not that country is probably more likely. But just, it has to be a locally adopted guideline, let's say.
Any further question?
Yes.
I've got my question's kind of got 2 parts, but I think the first part's more for Gabby. Which is just, can I just check that the changes that need to be made within the course like it needs, the COIL activity needs to be graded somehow. Is it possible for that activity to be graded formatively? So it basically all that the COIL activity does is supports the existing assessments. That can happen.
Yeah,
Yes.
that's also what happened in our case studies, that
Right.
the COIL generated an outcome that was then linked to the formative assessment, but also every task that we planned within the COIL sessions were feeding towards the final outcome of the COIL.
Right.
So it was very well planned in terms of stage by stage progression through the tasks
Yeah.
towards those competencies that the American associations comes up with. So they are not set in stone, it's not something that you must do, but certainly you can look into how to create that within the context of our assessment. Having said that, as I said before, we also had a summative assessment where students had to choose an area of the course that they wanted to reflect upon,
Yeah.
and they, by their choices, went towards the COIL.
But let's just say we're only using the COIL activity to formatively kind of assess and then support the summative assessments that are already in the PIP. Does that mean that the ILOs are the same and the assessments in the PIP are still the same? Does
Yes.
that mean that would we still have to create a new PIP that's just a coiled version,
Yeah, so you must create a new PIP.
but it would still
Uh-huh.
be, but the text in the document could effectively be exactly the same?
And it might be that you're just slightly augmenting the ILOs in the assessment to say that this helps the student to
Yeah.
reflect upon COIL. Okay, so we do need to, because if you see this on, you put this in the course catalogue, this is the source of truth for the student, isn't it? So you put this acronym in, and you unpack it, and there's 5 more lines than there are words, okay? And then the student kind of gets lost in it as well. So it's our responsibility to flag this to the student. But you might be absolutely looking to achieve the same thing in that course.
Yeah.
There just happens to be a really interesting group that have joined you. That's ideal, actually. The assessment is exactly the same. The students can still see the central ethos of the course in it. But the COIL just adds a wee bit something sweet to it as well. So see it as that. It's almost like you've just had lunch, but there's still some pastries. Okay, it's a nice accompaniment to the course. But we're not trying to throw you off the scent of what the course is there to do. You will have engineers still making engines and nuts and bolts, but there just happens to be a group from Denver in the class. Okay, and that enriches, because there might just be a term that everybody uses synonymously at Glasgow. It doesn't land in Denver, okay? And that's the beauty of COIL.
And I would say, for example, for an example like that, you might want to add into your assessment not just describing how the machine works, but how it changes towards the machinery had been suggested by different cultural aspects.
Yeah.
So what comes from the Denver model of the machine and the University of Glasgow model of the machine, how do they are similar, how are they different, why they are different? So look into that sort of contribution to that. And the PowerPoint that Alexi provided today gave a sort of, route that you can go through to design those learning outcomes with that weak trick, as Ashley saying, that can reflect that COIL aspect. Think about the comparative aspect of COIL, think about the discussion aspect of COIL, the ability to present, the ability to, so all those abilities that can really, even changing a little bit one verb of the IELTS can still help towards that.
Thank you.
Please email me if you've got any questions at all, and good luck with it all. Don't be afraid of changes like this. This is that's all I do is try and get people to change what they're doing, but it can be really exciting and really for the students as well. And if that just opens up a window for a student just to apply for that scholarship over the summer that they would never have heard about, or go on holiday to a foreign country, because they feel that they can at least communicate and be understood with someone who English isn't their first language, for example, then it might just really be quite changing for them, and really quite productive. Okay. So thanks for your time, and good luck with the rest of your day. Have you finished?
Yeah,
that's
we finished just now. So thank you so much for the